Thanksgiving had always been a family affair, chaotic, loud, but oddly comforting. The smell of turkey wafted through the house as everyone gathered around the table, trying to catch up amidst the usual hustle. But this year something felt different. My name's Avery and I was used to my dad's big promises. But there was something about the way he was talking to Grandma this year that seemed calculated. We sat around the dining room, everyone picking at their food, but all I could hear was my dad's smooth voice. "You know, Mom," he said, pouring her a drink, "we could really use a family vacation. It's been ages since we all took time off. A trip to Hawaii? A nice resort. What do you think?" Grandma smiled, but I could see the skepticism in her eyes. "It's a lot of money, Greg." "I don't know." "Oh, it's just a little money for us to reconnect as a family. You know how hard it is to get everyone together. This could be the break we all need, especially with the holidays coming up. The whole family deserves it." I watched Grandma hesitate, her eyes flicking to me then back to my dad. She always trusted him. She was the type to give him the benefit of the doubt, no matter how many times he disappointed her. "All right," she finally said, "I'll help with the trip. But only if everyone agrees." I didn't realize it then, but that moment sealed my fate. Dad had convinced her to pay for a $20,000 trip to Hawaii. Grandma, who had worked her entire life to support her family, was about to give Dad another chance to prove he could hold it together. And I was about to learn a very harsh lesson. It wasn't long before the trip was arranged. My dad, of course, was the mastermind behind it all. He organized everything: the flights, the resort, the excursions. It was supposed to be a dream vacation, one where we'd leave our stresses behind and enjoy the kind of luxury we never could have afforded on our own. It was his vision, and he made sure we all believed it would be perfect. In the weeks leading up to the trip, my dad was a different person. He was excited, talking nonstop about how this was going to be the best Thanksgiving ever. He even got me to take a few days off from work, making it sound like we'd have this amazing family time together. But there was always something in his eyes, something I couldn't quite place. It was the same way he acted when he was about to pull one of his usual tricks. I had a bad feeling. When Thanksgiving finally arrived, Grandma was practically glowing as she handed Dad the check for the trip. He made a big show of hugging her and thanking her, but I could see the pride in his eyes. She was his ticket as usual. On the plane, everyone was excited, but I felt uneasy. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Dad kept mentioning how we were all lucky to be going, and how Grandma was making it all possible. He even casually mentioned how he planned to treat us to a few fancy meals when we got there. But something was off. His words didn't match his actions. He kept talking about it in a way that felt less like a family trip and more like a business transaction. I just didn't know what he was planning. But I was about to find out. The resort in Hawaii was everything my dad had promised. Stunning views, luxury accommodations, and more amenities than any of us could have imagined. We arrived in the afternoon, and for a moment, I allowed myself to be swept up in the grandeur of it all. The pool was sparkling, the ocean waves crashed against the shore, and the air smelled like tropical flowers. But as we checked in, I noticed something strange. My dad wasn't as excited as he had been earlier. His energy felt off. It wasn't the carefree attitude I expected from him when things were going his way. Grandma was all smiles, delighted by the surprise vacation that, in her mind, was a gift for the whole family. She beamed as she handed over her credit card to pay for the additional services, something Dad had convinced her would complete the experience. But then it happened. As we stood in front of the front desk, Dad turned to me and my brother, his voice low enough that only we could hear. "You two need to take care of your own expenses while we're here. I'm not footing the bill for everything," he said, his words cutting through the excitement. I blinked, not sure if I had heard him correctly. "What do you mean?" "I thought this was a family vacation," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad's eyes flickered, then he glanced over at Grandma, who was talking to the concierge. "You heard me. Go earn your own. This trip, it's on you now. Not me. I convinced your grandmother to pay for the trip, but you can handle the rest." I stood there stunned. The $20,000 trip that was supposed to be a gift from the family had suddenly turned into a cruel joke. Dad had always found ways to manipulate people, but this was next level. Grandma had no idea. She was still in the dark, assuming everything was perfectly fine. But I knew in that moment that Dad had set me up for something far worse than just a vacation. I was speechless. My brother Matt stood beside me, his face blank. He hadn't said a word, but I could tell he was just as shocked as I was. Dad's casual declaration that we were now responsible for our own expenses didn't sit right. Grandma had generously given him the $20,000 for this trip, trusting that it would be a once-in-a-lifetime experience for the whole family. But now, Dad had shifted the burden onto us without any warning. We all headed to our rooms and I could feel the tension building in the air. The once jovial mood was now heavy, suffocating. As we unpacked, Matt looked at me with a frustrated expression. "This is insane," he muttered, throwing his suitcase onto the bed. "How does he get away with this?" I didn't know how to respond. How had I not seen this coming? Dad had always been good at pretending to be the hero, the one who swoops in with grand gestures, but it was all just smoke and mirrors. The reality was that he was using this trip as yet another way to manipulate people, to make us believe he was doing something noble when, in fact, he was only looking out for himself. When we sat down for dinner later that evening, everything felt off. Grandma was laughing with the waiter, clearly in her element, not understanding the shift in tone. I could hear her saying, "It's so wonderful that we're all together. The whole family." But I knew that she had no idea what was really going on. Dad, as usual, was playing the role of the charming patriarch. He looked at me with a smile as if everything was fine, like there hadn't been a massive shift in the situation. But I wasn't playing along. Not this time. "I'm not sure how I'm going to pay for these extra meals," I said, my voice as calm as I could make it. "I didn't know we were on our own for this." Dad's smile faltered just slightly, but he recovered quickly. "It's not that big of a deal. You've got the means to handle it, right?" I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "I wasn't prepared for this, Dad. You asked Grandma to pay for this trip. You convinced her. Now you want us to pick up the tab." He chuckled, his gaze darting over to Grandma, who was oblivious to the tension. "Come on, Avery. It's a family trip. You think I was going to take care of everything? You're adults now. Time to take responsibility." I could see the way he manipulated the situation, turning the tables so that we were the ones who had to feel guilty for even questioning his behavior. And as much as I wanted to lash out, I knew it would be pointless. This wasn't the first time he'd done something like this. And I had to decide then and there that I wasn't going to let him drag me down into his web of deceit. That night I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about how I had been manipulated again, how my father had promised a family experience, only to leave me and Matt to deal with the financial mess he had created. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle. It was the constant cycle of him promising something, making it sound like a grand gesture, and then pulling the rug out from under us. The next day the tension was palpable. I couldn't shake the feeling that Dad was playing a game, one where we were the pawns and he was the king. Every time we tried to enjoy ourselves, he'd find a way to make us feel small, as if reminding us of our obligations. It wasn't just the money, it was the control. As we made our way to a beautiful beach for a family excursion that Dad had arranged, the feeling of unease grew stronger. He had insisted we take the trip, but he was already subtly planting the idea that it would be up to us to figure out how to pay for the various activities. When we arrived at the beach, Dad casually mentioned to Grandma that he would let the kids pay for the excursions themselves. It was a small comment, but it hung in the air like a weight. Grandma, of course, didn't think anything of it. She was thrilled to see everyone enjoying the trip, her face glowing as she took in the view. But Matt and I exchanged looks. We didn't need to speak. We both knew what Dad was doing. This wasn't a vacation, it was a setup. He had orchestrated it all to make us feel indebted, to force us into a situation where we were uncomfortable. That evening, after another round of lavish meals we had to pay for out of our own pockets, I couldn't take it anymore. The frustration bubbled over and I knew I had to confront him. I walked into the lounge area of the resort, where Dad was lounging with a drink, casually chatting about the great trip he had planned. "Dad," I said, my voice sharper than I intended, "we need to talk." He looked up, his eyes narrowing for just a second, but his grin returned. "What's up, Avery? Everything good?" I couldn't hold back anymore. "No, everything is not good. You promised this trip would be a family vacation. You convinced Grandma to pay for it and now you've turned it into something we have to fund ourselves. I'm done pretending this is okay." Dad's expression shifted, but not in the way I expected. He didn't get defensive. Instead he laughed, a low, self-satisfied laugh. "Come on, Avery. Don't be dramatic. It's just a little financial responsibility. You've got the means. You can handle it. You don't need me to bail you out, do you?" I could feel the sting of his words, but I held my ground. This wasn't about responsibility. This was about you manipulating Grandma into paying for the trip, and then leaving us to cover the cost. You're using us just like you always do. His smile faltered for a moment, but then he straightened up, his posture shifting as if he was playing the role of the wise father again. "You think I'm using you? he asked, his voice calm and almost pitying. No, Avery. I'm teaching you something important. You want to live in the real world? Then you have to pay your way. The world doesn't give you handouts. I've given you everything I can. It's time you figured out how to stand on your own 2 feet. I stared at him, stunned by his arrogance. He truly believed that what he was doing was for our benefit. He thought that by forcing us to pay for this vacation, he was teaching us some kind of lesson. But all I saw was a man who had no qualms about using his own family to get what he wanted. I don't need your lesson, I said, my voice steady despite the anger rising inside me. What I need is for you to stop manipulating people. Grandma didn't deserve to be dragged into your scheme, and neither did I. Dad looked at me for a long moment as if sizing me up. Then, with a dismissive shrug, he stood up. Fine, he said, his tone icy. You don't want to learn from me, then go ahead and do it your way. I've given you everything I can. It's not my fault you can't see that. And with that, he walked off, leaving me standing there, feeling a mixture of fury and disbelief. This wasn't a family vacation, it was a game. And once again I had been played. The day after the confrontation with Dad, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't had before. I knew exactly what was happening now. My father had always been a master at spinning things, at playing the hero when it suited him, and the villain when it was necessary. But this time there was no escape from the truth. The resort was beautiful, the perfect setting for what should have been a relaxing getaway, but everything felt different. Every meal, every activity, even the conversations felt tainted by the fact that Dad had turned this trip into a financial burden on us. He had convinced Grandma to fund it, but now he was making us pay for every little thing, using our discomfort as a form of control. I spent the morning by the pool trying to avoid the noise in my head. Matt joined me after a while, and I could tell he was just as unsettled. We didn't need to say much. It was clear to both of us that Dad had crossed a line, and neither of us knew how to fix it. Do you think he's doing this on purpose? Matt asked, breaking the silence. I sighed, shaking my head. Of course he is. He always does this. He makes everything seem like it's a big, happy family moment, and then twists it so that we're the ones stuck cleaning up his mess. We both sat in silence for a while, watching the waves crash against the shore. It was beautiful here, paradise really, but it felt hollow. I couldn't enjoy it knowing what was happening beneath the surface. I'm done, Matt, I said, my voice quieter than usual. I've been trying to fix things for too long. I've been trying to make Dad proud, trying to earn his respect, but it's never enough. It's never going to be enough. Matt didn't say anything at first, but then he nodded slowly. I get it. I've been trying to please him too. But it's like we're just puppets. We do what he says and he gets everything he wants. I don't want to do this anymore. And just like that, I realized something that had been building inside me for years. This wasn't just about the trip. It wasn't even about the money. It was about control, about how Dad always had a way of making us feel like we owed him, like we were never quite good enough unless we played by his rules. I'm not going to let him manipulate me anymore, I said, the resolve growing stronger. I'm done with it. The next day I woke up with a new sense of purpose. I wasn't going to let this trip destroy me. I wasn't going to let Dad's manipulation control my every move. I had spent too much of my life trying to live up to his expectations, always bending to his whims, and it had led me nowhere but to a constant feeling of disappointment and frustration. I knew what I had to do. After breakfast, I found Matt in the lobby, staring out at the ocean, looking just as lost in thought as I had been. I walked up to him, standing there for a moment before I spoke. I think it's time we confront him, Matt. We can't keep letting him do this to us. We have to stand up for ourselves. He looked at me, his face serious. Are you sure? I mean, it's Dad. You know how he is. It's never easy. I don't care anymore, I said, my voice steady. He's not going to control me like this. It's time to take back the power. We both walked over to Dad, who was sitting in the lounge area, sipping coffee and chatting casually with one of the resort staff. When he saw us approach, his smile stretched wide, the same fake warmth that had always been there. Hey kids, he said, gesturing to the chairs beside him. Come sit. You guys enjoying the trip? I stood there for a moment, looking at him, trying to suppress the anger bubbling up inside me. We need to talk, Dad, I said, my tone calm but firm. Dad raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. Sure, what's up? This isn't working, I said, my voice stronger now. This whole trip, this whole situation, it's not right. You've manipulated Grandma into paying for everything, and now you've left us to cover the costs. We're done playing along with your games. He blinked, almost as if he couldn't believe what I was saying. What are you talking about, Avery? I told you this is a family vacation. You guys need to contribute. You can't just rely on me for everything. Rely on you? I shot back, unable to hold back the frustration any longer. This was supposed to be a gift from the family, Dad. You convinced Grandma to pay for it. Now you're making us pay for every meal, every activity, like it's our responsibility. You've used us for your own gain. He stood up then, his expression shifting from surprise to defensiveness. I'm just trying to teach you both responsibility. The world isn't going to give you anything for free. You think this is a free ride? You have to work for it. No, I said, standing my ground. We've been working for it our whole lives. You just want to control everything. You manipulate people to get what you want, and we're done letting you do it to us. We're not playing this game anymore. There was a long silence, and I could see Dad's face flush with anger. But this time I didn't flinch. I was done letting him push me around. You think you've got it all figured out, huh? He sneered, his voice colder now. You don't understand the way the world works. You're just angry because I'm not handing you everything on a silver platter. I shook my head, finally speaking the truth I had kept buried for years. No, Dad. I'm angry because you've never treated us like equals. You've always made us feel like we owe you something, like we're not good enough unless we do things your way. But I'm not playing by your rules anymore. For a moment, it seemed like he was going to say something more, but then he just turned away, muttering something under his breath. I looked over at Matt, who had been quiet throughout the exchange. His expression had softened, and for the first time, I saw the weight of years of manipulation in his eyes. We don't need him, Avery, he said quietly. We've got this. We don't have to play his game anymore. I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I had stood up for myself. I had confronted him. And no matter what happened next, I knew I had taken control of my own life. The following morning was the hardest. Dad barely spoke to either of us, his usual charm replaced by a cold, distant demeanor. He had always been good at pretending that everything was fine, that he was in control, but now that the truth was out, the mask had slipped. We weren't playing his game anymore, and that realization had left him frustrated. But I didn't care. I had made my decision, and for the first time I didn't feel guilty about it. I wasn't going to let him dictate my happiness or my choices anymore. I was done being his pawn. We spent the rest of the day by the beach, trying to make the most of the trip despite the tension that hung in the air. Matt and I talked, the conversations easy but filled with the weight of what had happened. We knew things had changed, permanently. Later that evening, as we gathered for dinner, the atmosphere was strained. Dad was still trying to keep up appearances, chatting with Grandma and acting as though nothing had shifted. But I could feel the divide between us. We weren't the same family anymore. Not after what had happened. As I sat down at the table, I glanced at Dad, his eyes avoiding mine as he pretended to enjoy his meal. It was then that I realized something important. Nothing had changed for him. He was still the same manipulative person he had always been. But I had changed. I had taken control of my own narrative. After dinner, as everyone retired to their rooms, I took a walk alone along the beach. The waves were gentle and the moonlight shimmered on the water. It was peaceful, and for the first time in a long time I felt calm. I wasn't the daughter who had to prove herself anymore. I wasn't the one who needed to apologize or justify my worth. I had been manipulated by Dad for years, but now I had learned something crucial. My worth didn't depend on his approval. I had nothing left to prove to anyone. The next morning I called Grandma to thank her again for the trip, despite everything that had happened. She didn't know the full extent of what had gone on, and part of me wanted to tell her, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. She had done what she thought was best for the family. She had only wanted to bring us together, not realizing that her son had used it as a way to maintain control. I'm grateful for the trip, Grandma, I said softly. But I think it's time for Matt and me to go home. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I understand, dear. You've got to do what's best for you. I just wanted us all to be together. I smiled, the weight of the situation lifting just a little. I know. Thank you for everything. We'll be in touch. As I hung up, I realized that the real victory wasn't in confronting Dad. It wasn't in making him see the error of his ways. The victory was in knowing that I was strong enough to walk away. I didn't need his approval or Grandma's money, or even the family trip. I had taken control of my life, and no one was going to take that away from me. We packed our bags that afternoon. The trip had started as a nightmare, but I had learned more than I ever thought possible. I had learned to stop letting the manipulations of others dictate my future. On the way to the airport, Matt turned to me. You really do have it figured out, don't you? I smiled, the first real smile I had worn in days. I think so. For once, I'm doing things for me. And as we boarded the plane, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had left the past behind. The real journey was just beginning.